Hello and welcome to Newsweek South Asia, your one-stop destination for in-depth analysis of security challenges, regional conflicts and the evolving threat of terrorism. Let's take a look at the headlines first. Pashtuns rally at UN against Pakistan, demand justice for targeted killings. Pakistan-backed terrorism faces major setback in Jammu and Kashmir. And Pakistan faces resistance as BLA strikes again. Pakistan's systematic repression of minorities has once again been laid bare on the global stage. Outside the United Nations Human Rights Council in Geneva, the Pashtun community rallied against Pakistan's brutal crackdown on their leaders, exposing the state's long history of extrajudicial killings and enforced disappearances. Led by the Pashtun Tahaffuz movement, demonstrators called on the international community to intervene against Pakistan's atrocities. Pakistan's track record of human rights abuses continues to draw global condemnation. The latest wave of protests erupted during the 58th session of the United Nations Human Rights Council, where Pashtun activists and human rights defenders gathered to demand accountability for Pakistan's relentless persecution of their community. The Pashtuns, an ethnic group straddling the border between Pakistan and Afghanistan, have long been subjected to state-sponsored violence, discrimination and arbitrary detentions. Pakistani authorities have consistently targeted Pashtun activists, journalists and leaders, branding them as security threats to silence their calls for justice. The PTM, an organization that has emerged as a staunch advocate for Pashtun rights, has brought global attention to the Pakistani military's unchecked power and its widespread oppression of civilians under the pretext of counter-terrorism operations. The Pashtun Tahaffuz movement, an organization that has emerged as a staunch advocate for Pashtun rights, has brought global attention to the Pakistani military's unchecked power and its widespread oppression of civilians under the pretext of counter-terrorism operations. Protesters denounced Pakistan's enforced disappearances, demanding the return of missing persons who have vanished at the hands of the security forces.
All the Pashtuns, Balochs and Sindhis gathered here to inform the world about the worst crisis that is developing in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and in Balochistan also. There are gross human rights violations committed by the Pakistani army. Now there is astronomical increase in the extrajudicial killings of notables, religious and nationalist leaders, especially recently a very renowned religious leader and Pashtun nationalist Mufti Munir Shakir was killed by the proxies of the state of Pakistan, and we hold the Pakistani Army Chief General Asim Munir responsible for his extrajudicial killing, and for all this chaos and insecurity in the region, the Pakistani state is responsible for all this.
Despite Pakistan's repeated claims of eliminating terrorism, its military operations in Pashtun majority regions, particularly in the federally administered tribal areas and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, tell a different story. These so-called counter-terrorism campaigns have led to mass civilian killings, widespread displacement and the destruction of entire villages. Rather than ensuring security, these operations have enabled a slow-motion genocide against the Pashtun people, all under the guise of combating militancy. Enforced disappearances remain a grim reality for Pashtuns who dare to question the Pakistani state. Thousands have gone missing, their families left without answers. Pakistani authorities routinely silence dissent through intimidation, arbitrary arrests, and extrajudicial killings.
आज इधर हम आया था जिनवा में स्विस में साज़मान मिलल का यूएन के सामने हमारे इधर एक प्रोटेस्ट है। तो परसों उन्होंने हमारे एक मौलवी था मुफ्ती शाकिर साहब, पाकिस्तानी मिलिट्री ने उसको कत्ल किया, शहीद किया। और भी हमारा नसीर साहब है और अली वज़ीरी है और हमारा बहुत पीटीएम का लोग जो है पाकिस्तान मिलिट्री में उन्होंने जेल में डाला है। और उधर हमारा सिचुएशन बहुत ख़राब है। पाकिस्तानी फौज जो हमेशा उधर टारगेट कर रहे हैं और हमारा लोग मार रहे हैं, हमारा लोग उठाता है, वो जेलों में डाल रहे हैं। तो पाकिस्तान में हमारा हालात इस टाइम में बहुत ख़राब है।
As the Pashtun struggle gains momentum internationally, the Pakistan government finds itself increasingly exposed. With each protest, the call for justice grows louder, transcending borders and garnering international attention. Moving on. Pakistan's terror machinery continues to face setbacks as Indian security forces intensify their crackdown on infiltrators in Jammu and Kashmir. In yet another major blow to Pakistan-backed terrorism, a Pakistani terrorist was neutralized in Kupwara, exposing Islamabad's ongoing attempts to destabilize the region. Meanwhile, intelligence reports suggest that frustrated terror handlers across the border are desperately trying to revive their failing agenda by targeting innocent civilians. But Indian security forces are leaving no stone unturned to dismantle these terror networks. Here's the full report.
In a significant counter-terrorism operation, Indian security forces eliminated a Pakistani terrorist in Jammu and Kashmir's Kupwara district. The terrorist, identified as Saifullah, was a resident of Pakistan and had been active in the region for a long time, orchestrating violence at the behest of Pakistani handlers. The encounter took place following intelligence inputs about terrorist presence in the area. Acting swiftly, security forces launched a cordon and search operation and established contact with the hiding terrorist, leading to his neutralization.
अर्ली मॉर्निंग में एक इनपुट मिला था जिसकी बिना पर एसओजी हंदवारा ने एक ऑपरेशन लॉन्च किया जिसको बाद में बाकी सिक्योरिटी फोर्सेस ने फॉलो किया। उसमें एक पाकिस्तानी टेररिस्ट जिसकी अभी शनाख्त सैफुल्लाह के नाम से हुई है, जो यहाँ पे काफ़ी कुछ अरसे से यहाँ सरगर्म था और न्यूट्रलाइज हुआ है आज के ऑपरेशन में। जो अभी हमने जब वहाँ कांटेक्ट हुआ उसके बाद एक डेड बॉडी जो रिट्रीव हुई है उसकी जो शनाख्त अभी बाकी कुछ जो एविडेंसेस मिले हैं उनके बेसिस पे सैफुल्लाह के नाम पे हुई है। बाकी इस तरह स्पेकुलेशंस हैं, उस पर अभी एरिया सेंसिटाइजेशन चल रही है।
Indian intelligence agencies believe that Pakistan's terror masterminds have been increasingly frustrated by the peaceful and people-driven Lok Sabha and Legislative Assembly elections in 2024. In an attempt to disrupt democratic progress in Jammu and Kashmir, Pakistan-backed terrorists have intensified attacks on civilians. Recently, 3 innocent civilians, including a 14-year-old boy, were brutally killed by terrorists in Kathua district. Additionally, the bodies of 2 missing civilians from Kazigund in Kulgam district were recovered. These victims, laborers from Rajouri, were in the valley to earn their livelihood but fell prey to Pakistan-sponsored extremist violence. Such cowardly attacks highlight Pakistan's continued use of terrorism as a state policy against India.
Pakistan is trying very desperately to revive the militancy, the terrorism in the valley, or now even in Jammu region, the same way that it did in the 90s. But this will not be, they will not be successful in this because the parameters and the entire perception of the people has changed. Earlier, when this started, at that time, there were some political personalities also who advocated independence, who advocated that the Jammu and Kashmir had never acceded to India. But all this has changed now after 2019, after the abrogation of Article 370 and the doing away of 35A. That has now shown the people of Jammu and Kashmir that they were, are, and will always remain a part of India. There is no two ways about it, and there should be no doubt in their minds that they are going to be separated out.
Indian government has taken decisive steps to counter terror threats in Jammu and Kashmir, chairing 3 high-level security review meetings since the beginning of 2025. The government directives to security agencies emphasize zero infiltration and zero tolerance for terrorists and their local enablers. These policies have strengthened India's counter-terror framework, ensuring tighter surveillance along the international border and line of control. Meanwhile, the National Investigation Agency has intensified its crackdown on Pakistan-backed terror networks. Recently, the agency conducted searches at 12 locations in Jammu district, targeting overground workers linked with Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed. These searches led to the recovery of incriminating materials, exposing deep-rooted connections between local operatives and Pakistan-based terror handlers.
This shows that NIA does a very thorough job. The searches that are carried out in Jammu and Kashmir recently are one step in that direction itself, because they had got information that the terrorists who did those strikes in Jammu region were assisted and aided by the underground workers. And as they got the information, they raided about 10-12 places over here in Jammu region to uncover and to get evidence against those people. And they have been very successful.
According to intelligence reports, Pakistani terror operatives have been infiltrating India through border routes with the help of overground workers and terror associates in Jammu and Kashmir. These individuals provide logistical support, shelter and money, ensuring safe passage for terrorists into Indian territory. Despite Pakistan's continuous attempts to destabilize Jammu and Kashmir, India's robust counter-terrorism mechanisms have successfully thwarted their nefarious designs. With increased security measures, stronger intelligence coordination, and relentless operations against terror networks, India remains firm in its commitment to eradicating Pakistan-sponsored terrorism from its soil.
In yet another blow to Pakistan's crumbling hold over Balochistan, the Baloch Liberation Army's Majid Brigade carried out a deadly Fidai attack in Noshki, Balochistan on March 16th. The attack, which targeted a Pakistani army convoy, not only exposed the vulnerabilities of Pakistan's security apparatus, but also signaled the growing strength of the Baloch insurgency. Islamabad's iron-fisted rule over the resource-rich yet impoverished province has only intensified resistance, pushing the Baloch people further towards an armed struggle for their rights.
A massive explosion ripped through the RCD highway in Balochistan's Noshki as a suicide bomber detonated a vehicle-borne improvised explosive device on a Pakistan army convoy. The Baloch Liberation Army claimed responsibility for the attack in the resistive province of Balochistan, further intensifying the long-running insurgency against Pakistan's occupation. According to Pakistan military, at least 5 security personnel were killed and 30 others were injured in the blast. However, the BLA has claimed a much higher toll, stating that at least 90 Pakistani soldiers were eliminated in the operation. The attack comes less than a week after a deadly train hijacking incident in Balochistan, in which the BLA targeted the Jafar Express carrying nearly 400 passengers. The insurgent group claimed to have eliminated over 200 Pakistani security personnel in the attack, further signaling its expanding operation capabilities.
There have been a number of deaths. One can't vouch for the number, but there are two things which are very clear from what is happening. Number one, attacks by Balochistan Liberation Army against the Pakistani army are increasing. This is the second one attack in quick succession after they took hostage the train last week with a large number of people, and the reports about that are still in dispute on the exact number of hostages taken, number of deaths, etc., etc. So the number of such incidents are increasing, clearly indicating that Balochistan Liberation Army is kind of intensifying their attacks against the Pakistani army, and it may increase further in the times to come.
The recent attacks are just the latest in the long-running insurgency that has persisted since Pakistan forcibly annexed the independent state of Kalat in 1948. For decades, Islamabad has treated Balochistan as a colony, exploiting its vast natural resources while keeping its people underdeveloped and deprived. Successive Pakistani governments, backed by the powerful military and intelligence agencies, have relied on brute force, extrajudicial killing, enforced disappearances, and military crackdowns to suppress Baloch aspiration. Baloch leaders such as Nawab Akbar Bukti has been assassinated, and thousands of activists continue to be abducted and silenced under fabricated charges of terrorism.
जितना ज़्यादा पाकिस्तान की आर्मी सख्त कदम उठाएगी, जितनी ज़्यादा वो लोगों को उठाकर प्रिजन में डालेगी, जेल में डालेगी, उन्हें आतंकी डिक्लेयर करेगी, उतना ज़्यादा वहाँ की अवाम में पाकिस्तान के खिलाफ और पाकिस्तानी आर्मी के खिलाफ गुस्सा पैदा होगा, रोष पैदा होगा, और उतने ही ज़्यादा बलूचिस्तान के लोग अपनी इंडिपेंडेंस के लिए लड़ेंगे.
Despite being rich in natural resources like gas, coal and minerals, Balochistan remains the most impoverished region in Pakistan. Over 70% of the population lives below the poverty line with little access to basic facilities such as healthcare and education. The China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, which Islamabad touts as a development game changer, has only exacerbated tensions in the province. Baloch activists accuse the Pakistani state of plundering their land and resources while leaving locals jobless and marginalized. The much-hyped Gwadar port, once envisioned as a strategic economic hub, has turned into a colossal failure. Job opportunities under CPEC have mostly gone to Punjabis, further fueling Baloch resentment and reinforcing their belief that the province is being treated as an internal colony of Islamabad's elite.
Pakistan has depended so far to a great extent on China for the economic welfare, economic support, and for strategic stability. If China finds that their stay in Pakistan becomes untenable because of increasing such attacks, Pakistan is going to become even more isolated. We have seen that the support to Pakistan from even the Gulf countries, Saudi Arabia or Oman or Qatar, etc., are coming down, are diminishing. So Pakistan is going to become even more isolated.
Years of unfulfilled promises, oppression and military brutality have left Baloch groups with little faith in Pakistan's ability or willingness to grant them their due rights. With each passing day, the insurgency gains further momentum as the Baloch people refuse to go down to Islamabad's tyranny. For the Baloch, this is no longer just a political struggle. It is a fight for survival, dignity and self-determination.
You just saw our special report on Balochistan, highlighting the ongoing insurgency, human rights violations, and the growing tensions between the Baloch and the Pakistani state. To further analyze these developments, we are joined by a key figure in the Baloch nationalist movement, Mehran Mari. As an outspoken advocate for Balochistan independence, he has long been a vocal critique of Pakistan's policies in the region. His insights are crucial in understanding the ongoing insurgency, the human rights situation, and the geopolitical challenges surrounding Balochistan. Hello, sir. Welcome to the show. Let's begin with the recent high-profile attack on the Jafar Express, which resulted in casualties among Pakistani security forces. The Balochistan Liberation Army has claimed responsibility. What message do you think this attack conveys?
I think this is not an isolated attack. The war of independence in Balochistan has been the latest spate of the war has started from the year 2000, 2005. It escalated. This is just a sequence of events. It has escalated in the recent past because the Pakistani army has escalated its atrocities in Balochistan. As you can see, the last 2 months, over 60 Baloch youth from Punjab universities, Sindh universities, and in other areas of Pakistan were abducted, forcibly disappeared. Peaceful demonstrators by leaders like Mahrang Baloch were totally ignored and ridiculed, and she was treated like a criminal, at least in the Pakistani media, and said, oh, why doesn't she condemn BLA attacks if she's a true leader, and all sorts of ridiculous things, although she's been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. You can see the contradiction in the world's view of Balochistan and its struggle and the Pakistani ISPR or Pindi's view. So obviously the world can't be wrong. It is Pindi's little fake bubble that it lives in, or its perceptive or its own perception of the reality.
The capability of Baloch armed groups to strike deep inside Pakistan raises significant questions. Do you believe that armed struggle is the only way forward for Balochistan's freedom, or is there any room for dialogue with the Pakistani state?
If Pakistan was a genuine state or a genuine nation, then there would have been space for negotiations and some kind of an adjustment or to deal with this crisis. There's a Pakistani journalist called Mansoor Ali Khan. He solely works for the ISPR Pakistani military establishment, and his statistics in his report day before yesterday was that 57 attacks by Baloch fighters on the Pakistani army, where we've not seen the statistics anywhere else. It's his words, 57 attacks, and only 12 injured and 6 maybe dead. So you can see the contradiction in their own statistics and their own stories on their media. There is a big increase, a big spate of big escalation is the correct word, in the Baloch freedom struggle. And I think this time it will come to some kind of conclusion. Come to the point of negotiation. The Pakistanis have never negotiated, and I don't think they will negotiate. They're too bullheaded and they're too stubborn. I think in Bangladesh it was obvious they've never negotiated. They put down their arms and dropped their pants in front of General Arora of Indian Army, but they did not negotiate. So they are stubborn, bullheaded people. No, unfortunately, this would have to come to a very ugly conclusion, like in Bangladesh, and let's hope it comes sooner rather than later.
In recent years, the BLA has carried out sophisticated attacks, including those targeting Chinese nationals and infrastructure projects. What do you think is the strategic significance of targeting Chinese interests in Balochistan?
I think the Baloch population, the Baloch fighters have appealed to all the partners of Pakistani establishment and the military, please refrain from further deepening our wounds by helping the Pakistan army in further exploitation of our resources. I know greed is a strong thing, and unfortunately the Chinese have maybe forgotten all moral dignity, and their greed has prevailed, and they've ignored that Balochistan is an occupied territory, and investing or taking wealth from there is stealing, is illegal according to international law. But Pakistan and maybe the generals on both sides are making money. I don't know how the intricate details are. But if you're going to be our enemy's friend, then automatically you are our enemy. I think that's the nature of the game.
Finally, looking at the larger picture, do you see any possibility for greater autonomy or self-governance in the future?
Absolutely. I think the Baloch have always been on a pedestal compared to the Pakistani establishment. They've always held a higher moral ground. Although we are an occupied nation, we are the subjugated people. Our leadership from the 60s, 70s has always said, like the Europeans have become the European Union, we always said, let's try to make it work. Fine, whatever happened, happened. They said, no point crying over spilled milk. Pakistan, Punjab made a mistake. Now let's make a United States of Pakistan. Let's all be equal shareholders in this. But they never accepted this. They always wanted to be the hakim and us the slaves. For 50 years, my father from day one never said about the independence of Pakistan. He said equal rights. Let's be equal citizens in this multicultural, multifaceted country called Pakistan. But they never accepted that. Now, unfortunately, I think the general public or the Baloch nation will not accept or will not believe, because at every step of the way, we have been cheated, lied to, and we've been treated inferior. So I think there's too much bad blood. There's too much water under the bridge. I don't think that we will accept anything less than independence.
And with that, we come to the end of this edition of Newsweek South Asia. We'll be back next week with more news, views and analysis from the subcontinent. Meanwhile, do keep writing to us at nwsa@anin.com. This is Shivangi Mishra signing off on behalf of the entire production team of Newsweek South Asia. Goodbye and take care.